Welcome to the deep dive. If you've ever, looked at a mortgage document or anything related to property law, you know the language can feel, well, almost designed to be confusing.
It really can. It's
Yeah.
dense, full of jargon, and the stakes couldn't be higher, could they? We're talking about potentially your biggest asset.
Exactly. So our mission today is pretty focused, cut through all that complex legal stuff.
Yeah, get to the core principles, the things that really matter, who owns what, who owes what, and critically, what happens if someone passes away. These distinctions trip people up all the time.
Okay, let's start right there with the language. People talk about conveyance when buying a house. What does that actually mean?
Conveyance, well, it's simply the legal machinery, the process of transferring property rights. From seller to buyer, usually.
Sounds straightforward, but even within that, the terms for borrower and lender, they get mixed up constantly. Mortgagor, mortgagee.
Ah, yes. It's almost counterintuitive, isn't it? The borrower, the person actually taking out the loan and making the payments, is the mortgagor. Think or for borrower.
Right, the mortgagor is the debtor.
Precisely. And the lender, usually the bank, the one providing the money and holding the security, is the mortgagee, the creditor.
Got it. Mortgagor borrows, mortgagee lends. Getting that straight is fundamental to reading any of these documents.
Absolutely foundational. It dictates who has the obligation.
Now, you mentioned things tripping people up. A lot of the modern structure for this comes from way back, specifically a big change in 1925, right?
Oh, 1925 was huge. A landmark year for UK property law. You had three massive acts passed: the Law of Property Act, the Land Registration Act, and the Land Charges Act.
And what did they do? What was the big shift?
Well, before 1925, creating a mortgage could involve actually transferring the legal ownership temporarily. It was complex. These acts streamlined everything.
How so?
They paved the way for the modern system,
Yeah.
which mainly uses a legal charge. This means the borrower, the mortgager, keeps the legal title. The property isn't transferred, it's just formally marked as security for the loan.
Okay, so the house secures the debt, but you still own it legally.
Exactly. In Scotland, they call it a standard security, but same idea. The property backs the loan.
And when we talk about owning the property itself, there are those two main types we hear about, freehold and leasehold. Can we break those down?
Sure. Let's start with freehold. The top tier, really. Legally, it's fee, simple, absolute, in possession.
Which sounds very grand and slightly terrifying.
It does. But it basically means three things. One, you can pass it on when you die. Fee simple. Two,
Yeah.
your ownership isn't limited by time. Absolute. Three, you have the right to live there now in possession. It's as close to total ownership as you get.
Okay, forever ownership, essentially. And leasehold. Estate for a term of years, absolute.
The key difference there is term of years. It's limited. Fixed duration. You own the right to occupy for a set period, maybe 99 years, maybe 999.
Or not the actual land underneath indefinitely.
No. You own the lease, the right to be there for that time. When the lease ends, the right reverts back to the freeholder.
It's interesting how ownership concepts have evolved. I remember seeing this old Latin phrase in the source material. Quies est solum, eius est usque ad coelum et ad inferos.
Ah, yes. Whoever owns the soil owns everything up to the heavens and down to the depths of the earth. A fantastic idea.
But completely impractical today, right?
Totally. You don't own the airspace. Infinitely upwards, planes can fly over. And crucially, you don't own everything downwards either.
How so? What are the limits there?
Well, the Crown generally retains the rights to valuable stuff found underground: oil, coal, natural gas, and even gold and silver. So no digging for treasure, unfortunately.
So, forget the depths of the earth. Modern law is much more focused on the depth of the debt against the property.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to the legal charge. What if you need more borrowing after the first mortgage?
Right, taking out a second loan against the house.
That's your second charge, or subsequent mortgage. Another loan, maybe with a different lender, secured against the same property that already has that first legal charge on it.
Okay, now this sounds like it could get complicated if things go wrong. Say the borrower defaults, the house has to be sold. Who gets paid first?
This is where the priority rule becomes absolutely critical. It's generally determined by the date the charge was registered with the land registry, first in time, first in right.
Meaning the lender who registered the first mortgage gets all their money back from the sale proceeds.
Before the second lender sees a single penny. Yes, the first mortgage debt plus costs must be fully satisfied.
Wow. So if the house sells for just enough to cover that first mortgage and the selling costs?
The second mortgagee gets nothing, wiped out.
That explains why second mortgages often have much higher interest rates.
Exactly. It's a much riskier position for the lender.
Yeah,
They need compensation for that risk.
definitely something to consider carefully. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Joint ownership, couples, families, friends, buying together. This area seems rife with potential confusion.
It is. And the choices made at the start, joint tenants or tenants in common, have huge consequences down the line. But first, we need this idea of legal versus equitable ownership.
The trust structure.
Precisely. So the legal owners are the people whose names are actually on the land registry title deeds. The law says you can have a maximum of 4 legal owners.
And they're the ones who can actually sell the property or take out a mortgage?
Yes, they hold the legal title, but they hold it on trust for the equitable owners.
And the equitable owners are.
They're the ones who actually benefit from the property. They have the right to enjoy it, live in it, and crucially, they're entitled to the money if it's sold.
So if a couple buys a house, they're usually both legal and equitable owners.
Typically, yes. They're both trustees holding the legal title and beneficiaries enjoying the equitable rights. Simple enough.
But what if, say, 6 friends buy a holiday cottage together?
Perfect example. Only 4 of them can be the registered legal owners. They hold the title.
But all 6 contributed money and want to use it.
So all 6 are equitable owners. They all have a beneficial interest, a share in the value. And those 4 legal owners must act in the best interest of all 6 when dealing with the property.
Okay, that distinction is clear. Now, the really big one. Joint tenancy versus tenancy in common. What is the absolute killer difference, especially when someone dies?
Let's start with joint tenancy. This is often the default, especially for married couples. The key idea here is undivided shares. Everyone owns 100% of the whole thing, together.
So not like 50-50 shares.
No. Conceptually, you both own the whole thing jointly. And this leads to the crucial feature, the right of survivorship.
Okay, what does that do?
It means if one joint tenant dies, their share, which isn't really a defined share anyway, doesn't go into their will. It doesn't pass to their heirs under intestacy rules.
Well, where does it go?
It automatically vanishes, and the surviving joint tenant, or tenants, instantly owns the entire property. It just happens by operation of law. The property bypasses the will completely.
Right, automatic transfer to the survivor. So what's tenancy in common then?
Tenancy in common is different. Here, the owners do hold distinct defined shares. It could be 50-50, 70-30, whatever they agree and document.
And the key difference on death?
No right of survivorship. When a tenant in common dies, their specific share does not automatically pass to the survivor.
So it can be passed on through their will?
Exactly. Or if they don't have a will, it passes according to the rules of intestacy. That defined share forms part of their estate.
That's a massive difference in outcome. What if people start as joint tenants maybe when they buy, but later want their share to go to, say, their children instead of their partner? Can they change it?
Yes, absolutely. You can sever the joint tenancy.
Sever it? How?
Usually it's done by one owner giving written notice, a notice of severance to the other joint owner. That act converts the ownership into a tenancy in common, usually in equal shares from that point. People do it often for estate planning or if they separate.
Okay, estate planning. This brings us to that case study you mentioned earlier, the one that highlights a potential inheritance tax trap, particularly for unmarried joint tenants, Joe and Glenda.
Yes, a really important illustration. Joe and Glenda, unmarried partners, owned their house with £800,000 as joint tenants. Mortgage fully paid off, they probably felt very secure.
Seems like it. Then Joe dies.
Because they were joint tenants, the right of survivorship kicks in. Glenda automatically becomes the sole legal owner of the £800,000 house. Seems straightforward.
But
Inheritance tax rules work differently. For IHT, HMRC treats this as if Joe owned a notional 50% share. So, £400,000 of value is considered to have passed from Joe's estate to Glenda upon his death.
And because they weren't married or civil partners, there's no spouse exemption for that £400,000 passing to Glenda.
Exactly. That £400,000 uses up Joe's nil rate band, the amount you can pass on tax-free, which was £325,000 in the example.
So the value over the £325,000 is potentially subject to IHT.
Yes. In their case, it created a potential IHT bill of around £30,000, 40% of the £75,000 excess. And Glenda, despite now owning the £800,000 house outright, suddenly needs to find £30,000 in cash to pay the tax bill generated by Joe's estate.
Wow, a tax liability arising purely because they chose joint tenancy, even with no mortgage left. That's a shocker.
It's a classic trap. The legal structure directly created a cash flow problem for the survivor.
So flipping that, if they had been tenants in common and Joe's 50% share, 400 pounds K, went, say, to his children via his will, how are those children's interests protected if Glenda is still the surviving legal owner on the title?
Good question. When property is held as tenants in common and one legal owner dies, leaving beneficiaries who aren't the surviving legal owner, there's a protection mechanism. The surviving legal owner generally cannot sell or mortgage the property on their own
Why not? They're still on the legal title.
because the law recognizes there are underlying beneficial interests the children share. The surviving legal owner usually needs to appoint a second trustee, someone else, to act alongside them before they can deal with the property. This ensures the sale proceeds are handled correctly and the beneficiary share is protected.
Is there a way to make that protection obvious on the property records?
Yes, and it's standard practice when setting up a tenancy in common. You register what's called a Form A restriction against the title at the land registry.
And what does that restriction do?
It puts a note on the official record saying that no disposition, like a sale or mortgage, by a sole surviving proprietor can be registered unless authorized by the court, or unless certain conditions ensuring the trust interests are protected are met. It basically flags up the tenancy in common structure and prevents the survivor acting alone without safeguarding the beneficiaries.
That restriction seems vital for tenants in common. Okay, this has been incredibly useful. We've defined those tricky mortgagee terms, looked at the 1925 legal bedrock, understood the crucial priority rule for debts.
And really unpack the huge difference between joint tenancy and tenancy in common, especially what happens on death and the potential tax traps.
So, the final thought for our listeners to take away from this.
I think it's this. Understanding your equitable ownership structure, how you actually hold the beneficial interest with your co-owners, is just as important, maybe even more so long-term, than just focusing on the mortgage debt itself.
So, the question is, if you own property with someone else, do you know for sure if you're joint tenants or tenants in common?
You absolutely need to know. Are you relying on survivorship, or can your share pass via your will? Because as Joe and Glenda's situation shows,
Even when the mortgage is completely gone, the original legal structure you chose can unexpectedly create significant financial liabilities years later, like an inheritance tax bill for the survivor. Proactive planning right from the start is key, something definitely worth checking on tonight.